Well, the Labour leader, Jacinda Ardern, joins me now in the Auckland studio. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Smile and wave. I've heard that directed at someone else in the past. What's your response?
Oh, actually, my response is to acknowledge the 33 years of service that Peter Dunn has given to politics. And, regardless of the circumstances, I wouldn't want to detract from a career as substantive as his. And I think he should be acknowledged for that.
He's claiming, though, that it's superficial, your appeal.
He's also claiming that I'm somehow personally responsible. I don't believe that to be true. I mean, Mr. Dunn did have a close race on his hand last election. Even before I became leader, it did look like it was going to turn into a race that Greg O'Connor was going to take. He's an excellent candidate. I can't claim in any way that I'm responsible for actually what's been Greg O'Connor's hard work on the ground.
Let's have a look at what you are responsible for, and that is Labour's policy.
Indeed.
Coming into the election. And let's address his claim that it somehow lacks robustness or is not substantial. I want to clear a few things up in our short time that we have this morning, if we can. The capital gains tax policy. Now, I know that you've got a policy that will extend the bright line test out to 5 years. So if you buy and sell a house within that 5-year period, you attract tax on it. Now, the policy had been, under Andrew Little, that any more broadening of a capital gains tax would go to a tax working group, and then you would seek a mandate in 2020. You now appear to be saying that you could introduce a broader capital gains tax within a first term of Labour government. Is that now your policy?
And I'm happy to be very, very clear on that. You're absolutely right. The government essentially introduced a capital gains tax. They just haven't called it that. And they did put a 2-year test there. We have said that because Treasury advice actually was that it should be closer to 5 years, that we believe that that's where it should be, and that's what we've had as part of our policy for a while now. When it comes to broadening that, we've said that actually we do want to give that to the experts to look at whether or not that 5-year bright line test is sufficient, or whether or not they think we should do things differently. And I absolutely stand by that we will still have the experts do that work. I don't want to predetermine, though, what they might come out with.
I'm not asking you to do that. Here's the key question.
Let me finish.
Well, I'm going
to answer your key question.
Well, you go.
I am not going to wait until another election to determine what we do with the advice that we get from those experts. Because I need to have the ability to make the best decisions in the interest of New Zealand, and I need to have the opportunity to do that as a leader.
Let's just communicate exactly what that means. That does mean, does it not, that Labour reserves the right to introduce a broader capital gains tax within its first term without seeking a 2020 mandate. Is that correct or not?
I reserve the right to act on the advice that we're given.
Okay, so that's a yes, isn't it?
It may not be a capital gains tax, but it might. But let me be clear. It will never be on the family home. Okay, so I am ruling that out.
All right.
I've already ruled that out, and I'm happy to do that again.
Well, let's see what else you can rule out. Would it be on a business?
I'm not predetermining what that working group comes back with.
You've just predetermined yourself. You've ruled out the family home. Now, if you can rule out the family home, you can rule out other things as well. What about a business? If I have a shoe factory and I buy it for $100,000 and it increases in value to $200,000, do I pay $15,000, which would be 15% of $100K?
I'm happy to rule out the family home because that is part of what Labour's values on this have always been. We've consistently said that we do not believe that any future possible CGT should apply to the family home,
so
and I stand by that.
But you're not ruling anything else out. You're not ruling a business a tax on the capital gain that attracts to a business?
Beyond that, I'm leaving it to a group of experts to work through what we need to do more broadly when it comes to our taxation in New Zealand. I've been really clear, Guy, and this is actually an issue of principle for me. We do not treat the way that people's incomes are earned in New Zealand fairly. Someone who goes out and works a 40-hour week does not have their income treated in the same way as someone who makes their income through multiple home ownership and flicking houses. But we need fairness in our system, and we're committed to that.
And you have had in Labour 9 years to come up with an alternative policy, and what you're saying to me this morning is I'm going to contract out that policy to someone else so that a person walking into a ballot box on the 23rd has no idea whether their sphere of employment in New Zealand is going to be subject to a capital gains tax.
I really refute that.
Do you reject it or refute it?
I reject what you're claiming.
Okay, well, let me hear you refute it then.
Because what we've set out is a set of principles here. We do not believe we have a fair taxation system in New Zealand. It doesn't compare well internationally.
But your idea of fairness might be something quite different from someone else's.
We do not compare well internationally. We're most other countries, we're one of only a handful that do not have any form of taxation in this way. So what we have said is, actually, we did try and do this work from opposition. It is difficult and technical work. We do want to bring in advisors because they may recommend that actually the bright line test of 5 years is sufficient.
But come on, you can't pretend that this is going to be some group of completely independent advisors. You're going to pick the advisors yourself, are you not?
We're going to set out some of our values.
And they will give you the answers broadly that you want.
Let me just look back on the way that past governments have dealt with these issues. So National, for instance, in 2008, went into government, and then in 2010, they had their own working group. They then increased GST.
They did. And what did you say about that? You said that they never campaigned on it. You said it was outrageous. You said that they were untrustworthy.
Brian, what they said was that they would not increase GST. I have been open. I am being transparent. I'm telling New Zealanders we're going to do this work when we're a government because it needs to happen.
Well, let's hear it then. So you can say to them, can you, that they can broadly expect a capital gains tax which would apply to the farm, to the business? I mean,
no, that is not what I'm saying. Let me restate again. I'm saying that we believe this work needs to be done because our taxation system in New Zealand isn't fair. We need that work to be undertaken. We've already indicated that we believe a 5-year bright line test is needed. We're campaigning on that. Beyond that, we want to do some extra work.
When did the policy change from being a 2020 mandate to being a possible first term initiative? When did that policy change?
And the only thing that has changed is that I'm taking the prerogative as leader to act on the advice I'm given in office. You know, that's what leaders do, Guyon. You have to make tough decisions. And let me be really clear.
How about telling the electorate what you're going to do before you get in there?
I'm doing that right now. But let me be absolutely clear. Once that advisory work comes back, probably we'll have maybe, 18 months, a year before an election. Every 3 years, voters have a chance to say, we agree with what you've done, we agree with your decisions, or we don't. They have that chance to vote every time. But yes, there is a difference in position between myself and Andrew Little on this, because I want to retain the right to make decisions that New Zealand needs and in their best
thank
interest.
You. That's good definition. Let's go to tax on personal incomes. Are you also going to leave that to a tax working group, or can you tell New Zealanders before they go to the ballot box whether or not you will be changing personal income tax rates?
On Wednesday, the government tomorrow opens up their books. At the moment, we don't have a clear sense of some of the projected funds available, as it were, for any potential future investment we think we need to make in areas like health and education. So what I've said is I want to look at the preview. I want to look at those results tomorrow.
So after the preview tomorrow,
we'll be giving an indication of our direction of travel after preview.
And does that mean you will be able to tell New Zealanders whether changes will be made in the first term to personal income tax rates? You will be able to give that
once we've looked at preview.
Okay, so that doesn't get
I've been very
contracted
clear
out
on that.
to the working group as well.
I've been very clear on that.
Okay. Can we talk briefly about immigration?
Yes. We can also talk about any one of the 7 policies we've also announced in the last 12 days, if you want to as well.
The beauty of this is that I get to choose what the questions are.
But it does speak directly to the
You get to choose what the answers are. That's
Indeed,
the deal,
and I'm
right?
happy, but it does point to the fact that there has been some criticism that we haven't been talking about policy, and that's all I've been talking about.
Well, I'm sure Peter Dunn is listening.
And Gareth Morgan, I'm sure, as well.
Quite possibly. We won't go into Gareth Morgan or makeup this morning. The idea of 30,000 fewer immigrants into New Zealand, that was the number that was put out with Andrew Little. Are you this morning committing to having 30,000 fewer immigrants into New Zealand?
I've committed to the same policy. Because those policy settings were all about making sure that we had those settings right for New Zealand. I'm not as fixated on the number. People have talked a lot about whether or not we have targets. We have no target. We just want to make sure that we're matching the settings for our immigration policy to the needs of New Zealand. So the settings have not changed. The policy has not changed.
You just don't want to talk about the number as much as he did.
I don't think it's accurate to talk about numbers in that way, because we can only estimate the impact of our policy changes on arrivals
So you still want to knock about 30,000 out, though?
Well, that's been the estimate of our policy, but you can't hard and fast say that will necessarily be the outcome.
All right. Just before we leave it, do you have a response to Gareth Morgan? Morgan.
I'm happy to add him to my email list so he can see all our policy updates.
Is Peter Dunn on that too? You can CC Peter Dunn in.
Peter Dunn, I think, will probably be enjoying a life outside of politics now.
Yes, he'll have plenty of time to watch. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for your time.
Really appreciate your time. That's the Labour Party leader, Jacinda Ardern. It's 12 minutes to 8.
Well, 10 American sailors are still missing after a US Navy just east of Singapore when the collision with the Liberian-flagged vessel occurred. The US Navy's ordered a worldwide operational pause of its fleet and ordered a wide investigation.
There could be some other explanations, but it's very difficult to see how this happened.
Experts say the oil tanker, the Alnic MC, is at least 3 times bigger than the USS John S. McCain. It can take this type of vessel miles to change course. Questions will be asked as to why a state-of-the-art Navy destroyer equipped with multiple radar systems and communications gear did not see, detect and evade it. This is thought to be the 4th time in a year that a US Navy vessel has been involved in an accident. In August last year, a submarine collided with an offshore support vessel in the Strait of Juan de Fuca off the coast of Washington state. In late January, the guided missile cruiser, the USS Antietam, ran aground while trying to anchor in Tokyo Bay, spilling around 1,000 gallons of hydraulic fluid. Then in May, a guided missile cruiser, the USS Lake Champlain, collided with a fishing vessel in the waters between Japan and the Korean peninsula. And just 2 months ago, 7 US sailors were killed when the USS Fitzgerald collided with a container ship in Japanese waters near the port city of Yokosuka. An investigation into that incident concluded last week that serious mistakes were made by the crew, and its commanding officer, executive officer and senior enlisted officer were all relieved of their responsibilities. With the USS John S. McCain now docked and undergoing repairs, this latest accident will no doubt lead to questions about the US Navy's training and its leadership.
That report was from the BBC's Samantha Simmons. Now it's 9 minutes to 8. Let's take a look at some of the traffic news this morning. In Auckland, a crash northbound on the southwestern motorway at Green Lane after Puhinui Road. Now it's clear of the lanes, but it has left some delays through the area. Also, there was a crash citybound on the southern motorway, heavy between Princes Street and Green Lane, where the crash before the Green Lane off-ramp is blocking the far left lane. Also down south this morning, there's been a 2-vehicle crash on Coronet Peak in Queenstown, 1 vehicle on fire there. Now, police are saying 2 people have been injured. They are out of the cars on Malagans Road and the road is currently blocked in both directions. This is between the intersection of Skippers Road, Little Road and North Ridge Road. Well, it's now 8 minutes to 9 on Morning Report, and Peter Dunn's shock resignation means Nationals lost a crucial +1. Without Ohariu, the job of winning enough seats to form the government gets harder. Let's talk to Nationals campaign manager Stephen Joyce, who's in the Wellington studio. Good morning.
Morning, Susie. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, the vote of no confidence seemingly coming from Peter Dunn in the National Party's ability to win.
Oh, I don't think so. I think Peter was obviously worried about his own ability to win, and I think that's fair because you've seen the polling numbers, the public poll, and certainly we'd factored in the fact that there was every chance he wouldn't win Ohariu this time because he was a fair way back with 5 weeks to go.
Didn't you want him to stay and fight, and didn't you expect him to stay and fight after endorsing him, though?
Well, we certainly expected him to stay and fight, yes. I think there's a bunch of letters in people's letterboxes all over the Ohariu electorate as we speak. But Peter's allowed to make his own call, and that's, I think he's earned that privilege after 33 years of service to the public to be able to say that this is not me anymore and I'm going to go. It would obviously have been operationally more helpful if he'd done it a couple of weeks ago, but Brett's ready, he's keen as mustard, and actually people in Ohariu are going to know pretty quickly that the game has completely changed, and now it's a two-way drag race, if you like, between him and the Labour candidate. It's
also completely changed for you, though, because without that support partner, even if National wins the seat, you're still kind of on the back foot, aren't you? Well, no. I think that the election campaign has changed. It's much more now a two-way drag race between ourselves and the blue team and the red team. That's true because all the left voters collapsed back into Labour. It looks very much in that respect like the 2005 campaign is against what it was previously looking a bit more like 2002. But there's now
some pretty clear lines and competing visions for New Zealand, and we're very keen and looking forward to the opportunity to talk more about that, because I think the other side of being deliberately a bit obtuse about what they would do and what they wouldn't do, as we've heard this morning.
Losing a key support partner, though, you couldn't have been more explicit in supporting him this time round, more so actually than previous times. And now National is not going to be able to put together the government that it wanted to, or more than likely.
I don't think we're talking about one seat. Now, one seat can be very important, but I think also the public will actually ultimately make that decision for us.
But on the current polling, you won't be able to get there, will you?
Depends on whose polling you look at. I generally don't look at Labor's internal polling. I think the TV1 poll is probably a better indication of where things are at. And we
can't
know
get there on the TV3 poll, can you?
I'm just going to say, I'm actually reasonably confident. I think as we're getting into the discussion about what the two parties would do for New Zealand, New Zealanders know that we're heading in the right direction overall. And,
kind of cherry picking on the polls, though, aren't you?
No, well, I'd never look at UMR. It's a bit like saying to you, look, Susie, look at my polling numbers. I mean, they're internal polls, and UMR, for example, has always been 4 or 5 points down on National, and that's never changed. UMR,
though, have a good reputation. It's a scientific poll. There's nothing actually wrong with the data, is there?
Yeah, well, except that, as I say, for the 5 elections I've been involved in, they've been about 4 or 5 points shy on National for the entire 5 elections. So I reckon the one that people should look at is, as always, is TV1 and TV3.
But TV3 is one of the ones that you can't get there on.
Well, my point. This is my point exactly. We're about 44, 45, depending on which poll you look at the moment. And we've got 4.5 weeks to go. We've got to definitely work hard and earn ourselves another 3%. We've been saying that for some time. And the way we're going to do that is put our policies, which are all about continuing on the path we're on with New Zealand to prosperity. The country's going in the right direction, putting them up against a bunch of policies which, again, we've seen this morning, Labor don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about until well after the election.
Peter Dunn's resignation, though, it does make it harder for you to get there. I think you would acknowledge that, if nothing else. And on that...
Well, hang on. On the basis that you thought he was going to get there anyway. But, yeah, look, this is a challenging election to win. All MMP elections are like that.
But on that score... that must mean, if you're being told that your job's going to be getting harder, you must be furious. No. I don't believe that you're sitting there taking this all completely in your stride and you're completely relaxed with all of this.
That's sort of how it works. I mean, election campaigns are like this. This is my 5th, so I'm familiar with the ebb and flow of election campaigns. And actually, I decided in my head a couple of weeks ago that Peter was going to struggle to make it back. And
so you thought he was going to lose?
I think he was going to struggle to make it back, and I've said that for some time.
You've got a key ally now, or someone who's been a key ally, who's now saying that you can't beat the Jacinda effect.
Who's
Labour
that?
Has momentum. This is Peter Dunn saying he can feel the winds of change.
Well, actually, yeah, but he also said a number of other things about Labour, which I think are absolutely fair, that actually it is about the issues and it is about the policy, and that's where we're heading in this election campaign. We have the pre-election fiscal update tomorrow. Basically, nobody knows what Labour's tax plan is. They don't want to tell anybody. We're very clear about where we are at. We're not adding a whole bunch of new taxes.
Speaking on that, though, if it's possible, will you be adding in another tax cut?
We'll just
when the books open tomorrow.
We'll just have to wait and see on that. But that's definitely something that we'd like to do.
So it's firstly, on the table.
Firstly, we've got to do the one that...
Hang on. So another tax cut be signalled when the books open tomorrow.
Well, firstly, we've got to do the one that's already there, which hasn't happened yet, which is April 1 next year, provided, of course, we're re-elected. Labor have said that they'll can that. So that's the first one to have. But we have been quite clear all the way through that if there was the room at some point in the future, we'd like to do another one, because it is about family incomes. It's about what they get to spend, about helping them make ends meet and meet their commitments. That's important.
Back to the future then, regarding a possible national government, if that's where you're at on the 23rd of September. You are now more than likely going to need Winston Peters and New Zealand First. That's really on the table now too, isn't it?
I just don't prejudge any of that. I mean, I appreciate that the commentariat like to try and determine the election result weeks in advance. We're 4 and a bit weeks in advance. We don't know whether the Greens will be there. Frankly, we don't know what the major parties' votes will be. We don't know what the New Zealand First vote will be. So I just say, give it a little bit of time. The public probably wouldn't mind a little bit of time to make their own decision.
Indeed. But if you are in that situation where it's going to be national and the possibility of national New Zealand First, Winston Peters, Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, firstly, it wouldn't be my call. That's above my pay grade. But the simple reality is we're not even there yet. I mean, we just literally, I'll come back to my point.
But
we don't know
just humour me, though.
No, I won't
humour
humour you because we don't know the combination
Deputy Prime
of
Minister, but, it's not. It's a distinct possibility now,
we
isn't
just don't know the combination of parties that will be returned. I mean, we could, for example, have other, the Māori Party, for example. I think you're writing off David Seymour and his crew. And I appreciate that, but there's other people that would turn around and write off the Greens. And if the Greens aren't in Parliament and get, say, 3 or 4%, then that's a wasted vote, which then goes distributed across the other parties. So, look, I think we're a long way from that part of the discussion. And actually, what's probably much more important now for the public, having got all this sort of leadership changes stuff out of the way, is they want to focus in, and, not to tell the media their job, but they actually probably want to focus in on the competing visions for New Zealand's future.
Would you rule out Winston as PM?
Well, I think Bill's already done that, and yes, I think we could safely do that. But look, again, you see, you're doing that again.
Appreciate your time. Stephen Joyce, thank you very much. It's 8 o'clock.
RNZ News at 8. Good morning, I'm Nicola Wright. Peter Dunn says there's an appetite for change in his Ohariu electorate, and he didn't want to lose in the election. The United Future leader yesterday announced he'll resign from